Hi, my name is Cullum and I'm a Blender enthusiast. I've been using Blender for close on 10 years and so I'm going to start sharing some tips that I have, I suppose, learned over the past number of years. And this first one is about environment lighting. Uh, Firstly, I'm using Blender version 4.4. So this is, and I generally work with EEVEE, not with cycles, because I just like to try and get these um, quality effects in the viewport and to see how far it can be pushed. So this is to do with world lighting. And as you can see in this scene here, I have this environment which is just an outdoor scene of a field, and it's basically lighting my scene. Now, typically, when you're bringing an environment light into a Blender, you go to the World tab in the node editor and the World Properties. And there you would click on Color, and you will import a background, and you'll get your background node in the shader, and then you'll add your environment light, which is a 360-degree image typically, and often a HDR. And as you can see, there's a very bright sun in this image, so it's lighting one side of this sphere that I have. The problem with this is that, or it's not so much of a problem, but the limitation, let's say, of this is that there's not really very much you can do with this. If you add a mapping node, of course, you can rotate the scene if you want the impact of that sunlight, for example, affecting from a different angle, and you can adjust the strength. But that's pretty much it. And of course, in EEVEE 4.4, if you go to the world property settings, you can click on shadow and it will have an impact on casting shadows from one object to another, which is a little bit more natural than just using lamps alone. But I've come up with a way of doing this. It's not particularly genius, but it's a more useful setup for controlling various aspects of this sky, both in its appearance in the viewport and its actual impact on the objects that you have. So for that, I'm just going to change over to a different environment, which is a snowfield. And here immediately you can see that the environment is black and white, and the object in the center is colored purple. But what's interesting about that, if I go to the properties for the material, you'll see that actually that object has no materials at all, yet it's purple. And the reason for that is I've set it up in such a way as that this environment that you see in the background, this black and white snowy field, is actually having a different light impact on the object in the scene. So how have I done that? So again, I just have my standard texture coordinate mapping node. I have my environment, which is this EXR file or HDR environment light of a snowy field. Now, you'll see here, I have a node group, and just maybe to start, I'll say VP stands for viewport. This is what you see in the viewport. And A and B stands for ambient. That is the effect, the ambient effect of this viewport light on the object. And they're different. So if I adjust this VP color or its strength, let's say to 1 in the viewport, and the hue to 0.5 and the saturation to 1, that's actually what the image looks like. I actually have it set to a different color space here, but maybe if I set it to SR standard color, I think that's actually probably not the right LUT for that particular image. Maybe if I set it to, let's say, Rec 186. In any event, maybe it's just not a great quality image, it's a bit overblown, but that's what the image looks like. And if I also do the exact same settings for the ambient effect, 1.5 and 1, then you can see that the effect that that light is casting on this shaderless or materialless sphere is different. It's now just basically white or cool, as you see on one side, which you'd expect from a snowy environment. But that might not always be the effect that you want. So I'll just add a material to this. I'll take up the roughness, and maybe I'll just color this with blue, like so. So what have I done here? So if I click on this node group that I've created and I tab into it, what you see is that it's fairly straightforward actually. I have my background nodes. I have two background nodes, but for the same image. And going into the color socket of each of those background nodes, I have a hue, saturation, and value node. And the strength of the background is plugged into the group input, and the color goes into the hue, saturation, and value. And I've taken out the input for hue and saturation. I don't need the value because that is the strength from the background node itself. And the color, the image in other words, is directly plugged into the hue, saturation, and value. And so all of these top values relate to what you see in the viewport. And the bottom one, which is exactly the same setup, relates to the ambient effect on the object. But how do I separate them? What I've done is I've used a mix shader and a light path node, and sorry, I just didn't mean to tab out of that. And if I open up the light path node, you'll see that I'm using the is camera array option plugged into the factor of that mix node. So that separates out the controls that I have for each of these two spheres. So I'll come out of here and then I'll just open up my in panel here and drag that out a little bit. So you'll see that there's the node group, and I should probably give it a label, and I'll say world, let's say world light control, and you can see that I'm not the best typist on earth. There we go, and there it is, world light control. And now I can file and I can save this. And then if I go to the world view here, I can, actually I have it done already. You see, you can save that simply by clicking here on this material. You can actually, I'll clear it as an asset actually. So if I go back into the world tab as I see here, and I click on that material, and I can mark it as an asset. And now I can file and save the file. So if I want to use this node setup for another world or environment texture in another file with a different image, etc., I can simply open that file and append this particular node, which will help me to have these distinguishing features. So let me say that I will turn the strength of that down because it's a bit too strong. Also, the saturation is a bit too strong, so I'll turn that down a little bit. And maybe change the hue a little bit too, to more, well, whatever you want to do. But then I can do the exact opposite in the ambient effect on the sphere itself. So that's just a node setup that you might find useful for having a little bit more control of the impact and the appearance of your environment on your scene using the Blender EEVEE. As I said, I don't really meddle with cycles too often, but and this is quick and easy in the viewport. Okay, thank you. If you like this, let me know. Give me a follow and ask me any question. I'll be happy to give tips on what I know and what I've learned over the last number of years. Thanks.